Before we begin, let us all bow our heads and pray in silence. 请大家低头默祷，预备心。Hallelujah, Amen. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we begin our hymnal worship. 要奉主耶稣圣名开始诗歌崇拜。Let us all sing hymn 177. 请大家唱诗177首。Hymn 177, 177首。First one, 第一节。Verse 2, 第二节。Last verse. Let us all continue to sing hymn 262. 继续唱诗262首。262, 226首。Verse 1, 第一节。Stop. days on to catch the wind, and quench the kindling fire. Verse 2, 第二句。Just give credence to Last verse, 最后一首。Lastly, let us all turn to 414. 414首 Hymn 414 414首。Verse 1. Verse 2. Verse 3. Sings the song, Last verse. This concludes our hymnal worship. 唱词大词。
弟兄姐妹们，大家晚上好。
Brothers and sisters, good evening.
感谢赞美神，我们可以一起来这里来举行安息日晚间聚会。
We praise and thank God for this opportunity to be here tonight to observe the Sabbath.
我们奉主耶稣圣名开始我们晚上的聚会。
In the name of Lord Jesus Christ, we'll commence this evening service.
我们一起来站起来唱诗391首。
Let's all rise and sing hymn 391.
I send the light in flashing, and heard the thunder roll. I felt the breakers dashing and trying to conquer my soul. I heard the voice of Jesus telling me still to fight on. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. He died for me on the mountain. The nations are sharp and keen. I feel a peace in knowing His Savior has stand and be true. He's there to shield me from danger when earthly friends are gone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. He died for me on the mountain, so great the pierced His side. For me He opened the fountain, the crimson gains in town. Near me He waits in glory, a city upon His throne. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He leave me alone.
大家请坐。
Be seated, please.
我们现在要一起跪下来祷告，请求神带领我们今天晚上的聚会。
We'll now all kneel down and pray in one accord and ask God to guide us throughout tonight's service.
我们一起来祷告。
Let's kneel down and pray.
好的，奉主耶稣基督圣名祷告。阿门。
Amen.
奉主耶稣圣名，在这里正道。
In the name of Lord Jesus Christ, I'll give sermon.
小弟今天晚上想以这个题目，就是死海之战的题目，跟大家做相互的勉励和分享。
And tonight, for our mutual encouragement and sharing, I'd like to share with you the topic, War in the Dead Sea.
我们来翻到创世纪的14章。
Let's turn to the Bible, Genesis chapter 14.
创世纪的14章，我们先从第1节读到第3节。
Genesis chapter 14, let's begin reading from verses 1 to 3.
创世纪14章的第1节，当安拉菲做示拿王，亚略做以拉撒王，基大脑马做以兰王，提哥做葛印王的时候，2他们都攻打索多王比拉、俄摩拉王比沙、亚玛王示拿、西扁王善以别和比拉王，比拉就是索尔。3这5王都在西定谷会合，西定谷就是沿海。所以在创世纪的14章的这个一章里面，记载着一场战争。
And in this 14th chapter of Genesis records a battle.
实际上，在圣经中，这可能是记载的第一场大型的战争。
In fact, this war was one of the first great wars.
这场战争是在这个所谓的4王跟5王之间发生，就是这4个王带领的这个部族来攻打这个5个王的部族。
And this was a war between 4 kings against 5 other kings.
那这个战争发生的地方叫西定谷，也就是沿海，也就是另外的名字是死海。
And this war took place in the valley of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea.
那这场战争有什么特别？我们知道世界上发生了千千万万的战争，人类历史上有更多数不清的战争。为什么这一场战争会记载在圣经上？
And in the history of humankind, there have been thousands and thousands of wars. Why was this one special? Why was it especially recorded?
因为这场战争卷入了神的选民，就是亚伯拉罕。
Because this war was the first appearance of Abram, who was selected by God, chosen by God.
Abraham.
Abraham.
因为这场战争本身跟世上其他的战争没有什么差别。
In fact, this war was no different than any other war.
这4王打5王，或者5王打4王，就像我们人类历史上多个国家的征战一样。
Whether it's 4 kings against 5 or vice versa, whether it's multiple nations against other multiple nations, they're all the same.
但是圣经中记载的神的选民亚伯兰以及他的侄子罗德，就是却因为一个没有意想到的情况下，卷入了这场战争。
But it is because of the chosen one, Abraham, that this war was particularly mentioned in the Bible.
我们待会要来查考这场战争带给我们的一些教训跟学习。
And we'll study tonight the lessons from this particular war.
首先，这场战争发生的地方是死海，死海就代表着这个世界。
And first and foremost, this war was held in the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea could represent as this world.
在圣经中，死海就代表着死亡，代表着这个世界，代表这个世界的结局。
The Dead Sea can represent death. It can represent this world we live in.
所以这场战争就跟世界上其他的战争一样，本身没有什么差别。
But the war itself was no different than any other war that has been fought in history.
在我们末世，这场征战的现象会越来越的频繁，就像主耶稣曾经曾经预言说，民会攻打民，国会攻打国一样。
And in fact, in the end days, as we are in today, it's just like what Jesus Christ said, that nations will fight against nations.
很多时候，我们不想跟这些世界上的征战有关系。
Many of us, I'm sure, don't want anything to do with wars.
但是却经常又不由自主的、不知不觉的就被卷入了这些战争中。
Unfortunately, we're sometimes caught up in these types of wars.
小弟开始在这一场道理，实际上是在2年前讲的，差不多刚刚2年的时间。
Actually, this particular sermon that I'm delivering tonight, I first delivered it about 2 years ago.
2年前，小弟在西南区的各个教会都讲过，就是没有在喜悦都教会讲过。
In fact, I've shared this sermon with most all churches in the Southwest region, except for Cerritos.
当时为什么会讲到这场 这场道理是因为发生了一件事情，就是在2年前，小弟收到一个电子邮件，就是小弟认识的一位同事，他是就是说跟小弟一起在开过会，吃过在同一张桌子上吃过饭的同事，出了在一场的这个灾祸中，他跟他的先生以及他的孩子都丧失了生命。
And the reason why I decided to come up with this sermon 2 years ago is because I was having lunch with a coworker of mine, and this coworker lost both her spouse and her children.
如果大家记得的话，2年前在新闻中我们会看到有一个飞机，一个民用的客机被伊朗的军队打下来了。
And if you recall, perhaps 2 years ago, in the news, it reported of an airliner that was shot down by the nation of Iran.
起因是因为美国我们的总统派这个特别部队去刺杀了伊朗的一位高级的将领。
And this is because the United States had an assassination attempt on the then general of the Iranian army.
然后后来伊朗就报复，就来攻打这个伊拉克这个美国使馆区。后来他们又害怕美国的报复，所以他们就看到一架飞机，以为是美国的军用飞机，就把它打下来。结果打下来的是这个民用的客机。
So as retribution, Iran then attacked forces in Iraq, and unfortunately, a passenger plane was caught in the middle of all this. Iran shot it down, thinking it was a military airliner.
小弟的这位同事，他是一位加拿大大学的一位教授，他刚好是在这个时间带他的家人回家探亲，然后正是要回来的路上，结果就坐在这个飞机上被打了下来。
And this colleague of mine was actually a professor in Canada, and their family was visiting Iran at the time, and unfortunately was caught up in this mess.
当我听到这个消息的时候，我就觉得人真的有时候不知道下一次会发生什么事情。
When I received this unfortunate news from my colleague, it truly reminded me that tomorrow is never guaranteed.
他跟他的家人在加拿大定居，跟这些美国或伊朗之间的争端完全扯不上关，但是不知不觉的就被卷入了进来。
She was a citizen. She and her family were citizens of Canada. Nothing to do with the wars between Iran, Iraq, or the United States, but unfortunately was caught in the middle.
真的很多时候，人就不知不觉的就陷入了灾祸之中。
So that is the way with mankind, unfortunately. We're sometimes caught, whether we like it or not, caught in the middle of a conflict.
你在高速公路上开车，可能是很认真的在开车，但旁边却有一个喝醉的人，可能会撞到你。
We can find ourselves driving on the highway, minding our own business, but out of from left field, someone who is under the influence may hit us.
你在这个世上，在我们现今的时代，你即使再小心，也有可能突然不知不觉的就染上了这个流行的病毒。
In today's age, in the time of this pandemic, we could mind our own business, take our precautions, yet still get sick.
那我们要从这一段中，我们来学习一下基督徒作为神的选民，我们怎么在这个乱世来处事。
So, as Christians, as chosen ones of God, how can we navigate this chaos?
我们来看这个14章的第8节，我们先从第8节开始读到第12节。
So let's jump to Genesis 14, verse 8 through 12.
创世纪14章的第8节，于是所多玛王、俄摩拉王、亚玛王、西扁王和比拉王都出来，在西甸谷摆阵与他们交战。9就是与以兰王基大脑马、可印王提达、示拿王暗拿菲、以拉撒王亚略交战，乃是4王与5王交战。10西甸谷有许多石漆坑，所多玛王和俄摩拉王逃跑，有掉在坑里的，其余的人都往山上逃跑。11 4王就把所多玛和俄摩拉所有的财物，并一切的粮食都掳掠去了。12 又把亚伯兰的侄儿罗德和罗德的财物掳掠去了。当时罗德正住在所多玛。所以我们看到这场战争的结果是这4王赢了那5王。
And here it records how the 4 kings defeated the 5 kings.
那这5王中有所多玛和俄摩拉王。
And amongst these 5 kings were the kings of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah.
当他们失败的时候，他们的所有的财物以及很多人口都被这4王掳掠去了。
And when they were defeated, all their possessions and all their citizens were all taken away.
其中包括这个亚伯兰的侄儿罗德和他的财物。
And Lot, who was the nephew of Abraham, was also taken.
我相信罗德他没有想到自己会卷入这场战争。
I'm sure Lot could not even imagine being caught up in this battle.
但是他完全没有责任吗？
But is he guiltless?
我们来看创世纪的14章的12节，后面讲到说，当时罗德正住在所多玛。
But if you take a look at verse 12, it says, Lot, who dwelt in Sodom.
所以罗德住在所多玛是他为什么会卷入这场战争的原因之一。
And this is the main reason why he was also caught in the middle of this war, is because he resided in Sodom.
创世纪13章讲到亚伯兰跟罗德分开。
In Genesis 13, it records how Abraham and Lot were separated.
而罗德做出了选择，要搬去所多玛。我们来看创世纪的13章。
And it was Lot who made the choice of moving to Sodom. Let's turn to Genesis 13.
创世纪的13章的第10节和11节。
Genesis 13, verses 10 and 11.
罗德举目看见约旦河的全平原，直到索尔，都是滋润的。那地在主神未灭所多玛、俄摩拉以先，如同主神的园子，也像埃及地。11。于是罗德选择约旦河的全平原，往东迁移，他们就彼此分离了。我们再跳到这个18节。
Let's jump to chapter 13, verse 18.
13章的18节，亚伯兰就搬了帐篷，来到希伯伦曼利的橡树那里居住，在那里为主神筑了一座坛。所以我们首先看到，当罗德陷入这场灾祸的一个原因之一，是他选择了一个地方来居住，而这个地方的居住就导致了他后面会陷入这场灾祸。
So here, in reading these 2 chapters, we learn that Lot's decision to move to Sodom was the sole reason why he also was caught up in this war.
他为什么会选择住在所多玛呢？因为他看到约旦河的平原是滋润的，土地是肥沃的。
So why would Lot select to move to Sodom in the first place? It's because it was like a garden. It
然
was
后在13章
plentiful.
的12节记载着，他说他逐渐挪移帐篷，直到所多玛，因为所多玛是一个繁华的都市。
And it also says in verse 12 that, come again, Ethan?
逐渐的挪移帐篷，直到所多玛。所以罗德是 gradually moved to the city of Sodoma.
Oh, okay. So while Adam dwelt in the land of Canaan, Lot gradually dwelt in the cities nearer and nearer to Sodom.
在所多玛这个城，当时它像埃及一样繁华。繁华那个prosperous.
And Sodom at the time was very prosperous.
所以当罗德选择的标准就是按照他这个城市的繁荣，以及可能他对他这个家庭可能工作的机会，以及他的这个牧人可以有这个足够的供给，按照这个方向来考虑。
So he probably selected this place of residence in Sodom based on the abundance and all the opportunities that were laid before him.
但却没有意识到所多玛人在主神面前是罪大恶极的。
But what Lot failed to see was that the citizens of Sodom were despised by God, as they were very sinful.
实际上，一个城市的繁华是对当地的居民的确有好处，但是也带来这个隐患，就是你很容易在陷入到各样的争端之中。
So the prosperity of a nation, or of a city in this case, is very important to its citizens and potential citizens, but it can also serve as their own stumbling block.
因为这4王就是因为这5王的财物，他就来攻打他们，就来掳掠他们的财物。
It is because of the possessions and the prosperity of these 5 kings that these 4 kings came after them.
所以，当我们选择我们要居住的地方，我们要非常的小心，我们要注意。要注意的是什么呢？
So when we select where we want to reside, we must be very careful. What is it that we must be careful of?
我们来看亚伯兰住的是什么地方。
Let's take a look at where Abram chose to live.
我们刚刚读到亚伯兰是住在希伯伦曼利的橡树那里居住。
It records here that Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan.
虽然这里没有讲到说这个曼利的橡树到底是个什么样的地方，你们可以用一下我们的想象力。
And it was all the plain of Jordan. So it doesn't describe in detail what type of place this was, but we can use these descriptions to imagine it.
不是 the plain of Jordan， 那是曼利的橡树。It's in verse 18， 13章的18节。13章的18节 ，near the great trees of Mamre, Hebron。
Yes, rather, that was for Lot, but for Abram, he moved his tent and dwelt by the trees of Mamre.
我们为什么知道这个地方不怎么样呢？因为我们可以想象一下，我们如果告诉某个城市的话，我们肯定会讲那个地方的地标。
And I'm sure we can describe certain key points of interest anytime we're talking about a certain city or place.
比如说，我们讲到台北，可能会提到这个101大楼哈，这个。
For example, for those who have been to Taiwan or to Taipei itself, we've described Taipei using Taipei 101, the building Taipei 101.
我们谈到日本，我们会谈到富士山。
When we talk about Japan, we would refer to Mount Fuji.
所以，一个地方的地标就是代表那个城市的文化。
And these points of interest actually are part of that place's culture.
那这个地方呢，唯一值得一提的，居然就是这么一棵大树，一棵大橡树。所以我们可以想象一下，那个地方是什么样的一个地方。
So for this place called Mamre, it's described using terebinth trees. So we can use these trees to serve as our imagination.
所以亚伯兰就是亚伯拉罕，他住的地方是一个荒凉的地方。
So Abram, who is Abraham, lived in the
A barren place. It's
in a very barren place.
但是好处是这个地方是神所应许他的这个应许之地。
But the important point here is that this was a place chosen by God.
并且他也能够在那里为神能足坛来敬拜神。
And he was not only able to live there, he was able to set up his tent and build an altar there to worship the Lord.
所以，如果我们想尽量避免卷入这世上的征战的时候，在我们选择我们居住的地方，我们的生活方式，我们就要非常的小心。
So, using this as an example, if we want to avoid these big conflicts in this world, we must be very careful in where we select to live.
因为你如果去追逐这世上的繁华，追逐这世上的成功，很有可能你就会被卷入进去这种世上的征战里面。
So just like in this case, if we choose to prioritize prosperity and wealth and success, then sometimes we'll find ourselves in amidst this conflict.
我们就回到创世纪的14章的接着往下读第13节，一直到16节。
Let's turn back to Genesis 14 from verses 13 to 16.
13节有一个逃出来的人告诉希伯来人亚伯兰，亚伯兰正住在亚摩利人曼利的橡树那里，曼利和以斯各并亚乃都是弟兄，曾与亚伯兰联盟。14亚伯兰听见他侄儿被掳去，就率领他家里生养的精练壮丁318人，直追到但。15便在夜间自己同仆人分队杀败敌人，又追到大马色左边的河巴。16将被掳掠的一切财物夺回来，连他侄儿罗德和他的财物以及妇女人民也都夺回来。所以在这里我们看到，当亚伯兰听到他的侄儿这个罗德被掳的消息的时候，他就采取了行动。
So here records that as soon as Abram heard of his nephew's predicament, he immediately went into action.
他自己带领了他的这个家里这个精练的壮丁，以及跟他的这些结盟的弟兄们一起带人去追这个四王，并且将他们杀败、打败，将他侄儿的财物以及其他们所夺的一些的财物都把他夺了回来。
And he took his trained servants and own brothers and divided these forces against the 4 kings, and not only saved Lot and his family, but all their possessions.
所以我们看到亚伯兰的这个行为的确是非常有勇气的一场的行为。
And we can see these actions by Abram and his fellow comrades were very heroic.
他不是因为罗德他选择了去索多玛说，他自找的，他应该的，他活该被人抢去，我不管。
Abram did not respond with, you deserve this. He did not respond with this sort of attitude.
而是能够带领自己的家人以及他的兄弟们一起去来帮助罗德，拯救罗德。
Rather, he took his servants and his own family members to go save Lot.
所以我们看到亚伯兰他本来可以置身事外，他却选择了卷入了事中。
So here, Lot, he had many places to live. He can live in the wilderness. He can live in the barren land. Yet he chose to live in this city.
我说亚伯拉罕他本来可以选择置身事外，他本来可以选择不卷入这场战争，但是他最后选择了加入了这场战争。
So Abram, he could have chosen not to get himself involved in this battle. He could have decided or chosen not to go save Lot, but he did.
所以我们在说的是两个对比哈。罗德他本来可以选择不卷入这场战争，但是他却被卷入了。
So here we are comparing 2 things. The first being Lot. He chose where he lived, and he unwittingly got caught up in this battle.
而亚伯兰他本身可以跟这场战争完全没有关系，但是他却选择了加入这场战争。
And on the other hand, Abram, who lived outside of in the wilderness, he could have chosen not to get involved, but he decided to get directly involved.
这个时候我们就看到了朋友的重要，我们看到了弟兄的重要。
Here we can see the importance of friends and family.
我们来看箴言的19章。来看17章，箴言的17章，不好意思。
Let's turn to Proverbs chapter 17.
箴言的17章的17节。
Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17.
17节，朋友乃时常亲爱，弟兄为患难而生。
A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity.
所以亚伯兰仍然对待罗德像对待他的弟兄一样。
So here, Abram treated his nephew Lot as his own brother.
并且亚伯兰他有他的这几位这个朋友都是很好的这个朋友，很好的弟兄，可以跟他一起作战，包括曼利、以斯各、亚乃这些人，全部都跟他联盟，跟他一起出击来打这场战争。
And he not only himself, but Abram took his trained servants and his fellow brothers, and they all sacrificed themselves to go fight.
所以我们可以看到关键的时候，这个弟兄的作用。
So we can see from this perspective the importance of brotherhood.
罗德是幸运的，因为他有亚伯兰这样的一个叔叔。
Lot is truly blessed to have this sort of uncle.
而亚伯兰也是幸运的，因为他有曼利、以斯各、亚乃这样的朋友。
And Abram was also blessed. He had brothers such as Eshol or Anna.
所以，当我们选择我们的朋友，我们要小心，不是一起吃喝玩乐的朋友，而是真正在患难的时候能够伸出援手来帮助我们的朋友。
So friends are not only for eating and drinking and having a good time. True friends are there during the hardest of times.
同样，从亚伯兰的角度来考虑，我们作为一个世上的基督徒，我们在碰到朋友有患难的时候，我们就置身事外，以保自己的安全吗？
So if you think about this and think about ourselves, could we, like Abraham, sacrifice ourselves to go help someone in another fellow brother or sister in need?
主耶稣告诉我们，我们不属这个世界，但是我们却不能离开这个世界。
Jesus told us, we are not of this world, but we cannot leave this world.
因为这个世上有我们的责任，有我们需要去帮助的人，需要去传的福音。
Because in this world, we have our responsibilities. We have our purpose in this world.
如果只是为了自己的安全、自己的舒适，而把自己关在一个屋子里，相信我们大家都不陌生哈，我们都已经关在屋子里2年了。
Unless we ourselves decide to lock ourselves up in our own homes and never see the light of day, even though we've kind of done that in the last 2 years.
但是这却不是神的旨意。
But locking ourselves up in our own homes is not the will of God.
因为神要让我们在这世上做世上的光，这世上的盐。
Because in this world, Jesus has us serve as the salt and the light of this world.
所以亚伯兰做到了，他能够出去，能够带领他的这个家人出去，这样子从一晚上追到白天。如果我们仔细来查考一下的话，从希伯伦到大马色，实际上是超过100多公里，他就这样子整夜的追了过去。
So we can see that Abram, from his own actions, Abram and his friends and brothers departed at night, traveled 100 kilometers to go fight.
有时候我们会想一想，他哪里来这么大的勇气？
And we sometimes wonder, where did all this, where was all this ability? Where did it come from?
The courage, where does this courage come from?
Where did this courage come from?
他5个王联合起来都被这4个王打败了，他就凭着他这个住在乡下的这几个人，就能够去把他们这个4王打败。
So how can someone living in the countryside defeat these 4 kings who had just defeated 5 kings?
我们如果来查考创世纪的时候，我们可以看到，其实亚伯兰在我们心中，他并不是一个勇敢的人。
And as we study, or if we study the book of Genesis, we learn that Abram is not the most brave person.
在创世纪的12章讲到，他因为旱灾的原因，他因为饥荒的原因，他跟他的太太搬去埃及。
And you can see in chapter 12, because of the famine, he and his family moved to Egypt.
而当埃及王法老看到他的太太，觉得她美貌，要抢去做妻子的时候，他一句话都不敢讲，连说这是我太太都不敢讲。
And when the Pharaoh came across his wife Sarai and found her pleasing and beautiful, and wanted to take her as his own wife, Abram said no word. He did not even utter that this is my wife.
所以他并不是一个天生勇敢、敢于跟权贵来做斗争的人。
So Abram was not a naturally brave and naturally confrontational person.
那么在这14章，当他的侄子罗德碰到问题的时候，突然一下子他变得这么的勇敢。
But you can see in chapter 14, as soon as his nephew Lot ran into trouble, he immediately sprung into action.
是罗德比他的太太更重要吗？
Does this mean that his nephew Lot was more important than his own wife?
我觉得是亚伯兰他发生了改变。
Of course not. I think it's because Abram experienced a great change.
为什么会改变？因为他经历了他在埃及发生的事情。
How did he change? It's because of his experiences in Egypt.
虽然他信心软弱，下到埃及而怀疑了神给他的应许，
Even though his faith was weakened and he had seeds of doubt in God's promise and moving to Egypt,
但是神在埃及大大施展他的能力，让他看到了，其实神才是掌控一切的。
but God, while Abram was in Egypt, proved his almightiness and power.
所以这是为什么他改变了，他变得有勇气了，他能够站起来面对这个世上的挑战。
So this is why Abram was able to change, able to develop courage, and able to face these conflicts.
虽然他只有300多人，但是他知道神与他同在。
Even though he only took with him 300 some odd men, what he knew was that God was with them.
他不会害怕吗？
Do you not think he was a little scared?
我相信他也会害怕。
I am certain he was also fearful.
为什么会害怕？那四王，他那个剩下的势力，随时都有可能回来报复他、攻击他。
Why would he be fearful? Of course, perhaps he could be defeated by these 4 kings, or they may come and find him afterwards.
但是我们却看到圣经中告诉我们，神亲自来安慰他。
But the Bible records that God personally comforted Abram.
我们来看15章的第1节。
Let's turn to Genesis 15, verse 1.
15章这第1节，这事以后，主神在异象中有话对亚伯兰说：“亚伯兰，你不要惧怕，我是你的盾牌，必大大的赏赐你。”
Chapter 15, verse 1. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward.
为什么神会安慰他？因为亚伯兰害怕。
Why would God comfort him? Because Abram was scared.
为什么亚伯兰不再害怕？因为神安慰他了。
Why was Abram no longer afraid? Because God comforted him.
我们今天害怕吗？
Are we afraid today?
我们听到新闻上每天这个往上涨的数字，我们害怕吗？
Each and every day we hear of calamities and bad news. Are we not afraid?
我们听到我们身边的人得病的消息，我们害怕吗？
When we hear about news of close friends beside us getting sick, do we not become afraid?
我们应该害怕，
We should be afraid.
但是我们更应该来求神的安慰，求神的保护。
But more importantly, in these times, we should ask God for his comfort and his protection.
因为我们如果相信神，我们对神有信心，神就一定会安慰我们，就像神安慰亚伯拉罕一样，他会做我们的盾牌。
Because if we believe in God, if we trust in God, he will serve as our shield, as our great reward.
所以亚伯兰就能够打败这个基大老马和他同盟的王，能够战胜回来。
This is exactly why Abram was able to defeat these 4 kings and victoriously win back Lot and all his possessions.
我们来接着往下看创世纪的14章的17节。我们接着往这里读。14章17节，我们读到这个14章的最后的结束。亚伯兰击败基大老马和他与他同盟的王回来的时候，所多玛王出来在沙威谷迎接他，沙威谷就是王谷18。又有撒冷王麦基洗德带着饼和酒出来迎接，他是至高神的祭司。19，他为亚伯兰祝福说：愿天地的主至高的神赐神于亚伯兰。20，至高的神把敌人交在你手里，是应当称颂的。亚伯兰就把所得的拿出1/10来给麦基洗德。21，所多玛王对亚伯兰说：你把人口给我，财物你自己拿去吧。22，亚伯兰对所多玛王说：我已经向天地的主至高的神起誓。23，凡是你的东西，就是一根线一根鞋带，我都不拿，免得你说我使亚伯兰富足。24，只有仆人所吃的，并且与我同行的雅乃、以斯各、曼利所应得的份，可以任凭他们拿去。所以这里讲到亚伯兰打完胜仗回来，有两个王来接他。
So here records when Abram returned from his battle in Sodom, 2 kings received him.
一个是所多玛王，
One was the king of Sodom.
也就是我们知道的这个罪恶之城的王。
We all know this was the king of the very sinful and ill city.
而这个王对亚伯兰还不错，他说：“你只要把人口给我，财物都给你，你随便拿。”
In verse 21, the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, and you take the goods for yourself."
而另外一个王是撒冷王麦基洗德。
And the other king was Melchizedek.
麦基洗德是至高神的祭司。
He was the king of Salem, the priest of the God Most High.
在使徒保罗的书信中，他曾经教导我们，麦基洗德就预表着主耶稣基督。
And we can see in the letters of Paul, Melchizedek was actually a prefiguration of Jesus Christ.
而麦基洗德带给亚伯兰的是非常简单的饼和酒。
And what Melchizedek brought out to Abram was quite simple, just bread and wine.
并且更重要的是，他带来了神给的祝福。
But more importantly, was he brought out a message from God, which was God's blessing to him, to
所以我们
Abram.
看到亚伯兰他拒绝了这个所多玛王所提供给他的东西，而去接受了麦基洗德的祝福。
So we can also see here that Abram rejected the king of Sodom's offer, rather he accepted what king of Salem, Melchizedek, offered.
就告诉我们，虽然他打了胜仗，但是他的头脑是清醒的。
Even though Abram just fought a brutal war, his mind was clear.
他知道他为什么要打这场战。
He knew exactly why he chose to fight
有
this
时候我
war.
们为了一个很好的目的去打一场征战，但是如果结局是成功的，在众人的欢呼声中，有时候我们就会忘乎所以，我们就忘记了自己本来的目标是什么。
Sometimes we choose to go fight a certain cause or a certain war, and we can become victorious. Even after this victory, we forget our original purpose.
亚伯兰他为什么要打这场战？
Why did Abram decide to fight this war?
他既不是羡慕世王的财物，更不是羡慕这个所多玛王所拥有的东西。
Abram was not looking for the wealth and the possessions of the 4 kings, nor was he finding any favor in what the king of Sodom had offered.
他打这场战的唯一的目的就是一个字，就是因为他爱罗德。
Abram chose to fight this battle because of one thing, and one thing only. That was he loved Lot.
所以他明白他要的是什么，所以他能够拒绝所多玛王所 所答应给他的所有的东西。
Abram knew exactly what he was after. That is how he was able to easily reject what the king of Sodom had offered.
因为当所多玛王给他的这些东西，你以为是免费的吗？
Because if you think about it, do you think King of Sodom's offer came without any conditions?
所多玛王给他这些东西，自然是想跟他建立一个很好的关系，以后有问题多找帮忙。
Perhaps the king of Sodom wanted to offer these possessions to Abram for a purpose in the future, maybe for a time of need.
中国人说吃人的嘴软，拿人的手软。你既然拿了人家的东西，以后人家有问题，你就要出手来帮忙。
There is a Chinese saying that if you eat of another man's possessions, you're going to have to help him with your hands later.
所以在这里，亚伯兰他跟所多玛王画得一清二楚，就知道，表明了他不想跟这世上的征战有任何的关系。
Rejecting this offer from the king of Sodom was a clear indication that Abraham rejected this world.
而麦基洗德带给他的是从神而来的祝福。
But what Melchizedek brought was a blessing from God.
又有着基本的这个饼和酒。
And also a very basic type of gift in bread and wine.
主耶稣在世上的时候，他看见这些信徒们来跟随他，听他的道理，他就变了5饼2鱼来喂饱，就从5饼2鱼来变出来了很多的这些食物来喂饱这些来听他的道理的人。
During the time of Jesus Christ, when the multitude came to listen to him, he was able to create abundance of food using 2 bread and 5 fish.
当这个在约翰福音中记载着，当一对新妇婚宴的时候没有酒了，主耶稣也变出酒出来，来让他们那个婚宴得以顺利的进行，而挽救了那场婚姻。
Additionally, there was also another incident where a newlywed couple ran out of wine, and Jesus was able to create more.
所以饼和酒虽然简单，却代表着我们生命中最基本的需要，包括我们日常这个所吃的，包括我们的家庭，包括我们的社会生活。
So bread and wine represent basic needs, basic necessities, such as our own health and food and our own living needs in this world.
我们也再来看一下箴言的第7章。
Now, let's also turn to Proverbs chapter 7.
对，箴言的第9章，箴言的第9章的第5节。
Proverbs chapter 9, chapter 9, verse 5.
9章的第5节，你们来吃我的饼，喝我调和的酒。
Come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine I have mixed.
是谁说这个话呢？在箴言中说是智慧在讲这个话。
So who said these words? In this chapter of Proverbs says it's the way of wisdom.
而第6节讲到说，你们愚蒙人要舍弃愚蒙，就得存活，并要走光明的道。
In verse 6, it says, forsake foolishness and live, and go in the way of understanding.
所以当领用这饼和酒，就是让我们得到智慧，让我们明白事理。
So eating the bread and drinking of the wine is so that you can live and that you can have wisdom.
所以在迎合在神的祝福下，过一个简单的生活，但是过一个有智慧的生活，而不是把自己沉浸在这个世俗的享乐之中。
And eating of this simple bread and drinking of this simple wine, you live under God and receive the wisdom that you cannot find in this world and not be lost in this world.
但是我们也看到亚伯兰不光在神面前他没有亏欠，他对人也从不亏欠。
So he owed nothing to anyone nor to God.
我们看到亚伯兰能够在神面前保持一个清洁的良心，所以他不会亏欠神。
So here, Abraham kept a very pure and righteous conscience.
但是他对他的同行的这些弟兄雅乃、以实各、曼利说，他们所应得的份都可以任凭他们拿去，所以他也不亏待他的这些跟他一同作战的弟兄们。
However, in verse 24, with exception of his own self, he did say that those brothers and the men that helped him, Aner, Eshel, and Mamre, they should all get their portion.
所以当你在神面前存无愧的良心的时候，同时我们要考虑我们周边的人。
So even though we have a clear conscience and a simple heart of thanksgiving, we should never forget those around us.
要照顾他们所需要的东西。
We must look after those around us and their needs.
所以今天我们从这个死海之战中学习到，我们作为基督徒，我们在这个乱世中要额外的小心。
So in these end times, in this chaotic world that we live in, we must be careful.
我们要选择我们所居住的地方，要非常的仔细，非常的小心。
When we choose where to live, we must be extremely diligent.
我们也要选择我们交往的人，我们的朋友圈，我们要非常的小心。
The friends we choose, the people we decide to spend our time with, we must be careful.
我们要能够把信仰放在第一位，不管我们住在哪里，总要能够有机会来主坛，来敬拜神。
No matter where we decide to live or choose to live, we must put our faith first. We must be able to build our altar.
这样子，我们被卷入这世上的征战的这个机会就会大大的减少。
That way, the amount of conflicts we may unsuspectingly find ourselves in this world would be limited.
但是当我们看到我们的这个弟兄姐妹，那需要我们帮助的人，他们在危难的时候，我们也会不犹豫的来卷入这世上的征战。
But like what Abram did, if we ourselves find our brothers and sisters and family around us suffering or in times of need, let's reach out our hands.
因为爱，所以我们不害怕。
It is because of love we are not afraid.
因为爱，我们不犹豫。因为神的安慰，所以我们不害怕。
Because of love, we don't worry. Because of God's comfort, we will not be afraid.
因为我们明白我们的初心是什么样子，所以我们不会被这个世上的这个享乐所引诱。
Because we will never forget our first love and our main purpose here, we will never be led astray by the world.
所以我们在神面前和人面前都能存着一颗无愧的良心。
So that way, before God and before man, we can have a very come again, Ethan.
Your conscience.
We can have a very clear conscience.
所以我们一起来唱诗176首。
Let's sing hymn 176.
Fear not to fight for him, he will help us all to win. God will always give us a victory. Against the might of Satan's hand, he will help us to withstand. God will always give us a victory. God will always give us a victory. He will always give us a victory. Watching over us today, he is there to guide our way. God will always give us a victory. When we shall ride out the field, for the Savior is always near. He will always give us a victory. May I read the word each day, that his will may ways are stayed on. Watching over us today, He is there to guide our way. God will always give us the victory. Though the road be rough and long, let us raise our marching song. God will always give us the victory. When the victory will win, we will rest in heaven with Him. God will always give us the victory. God will always give us the victory. He will always give us the victory. Watching over us today, He is there to guide our way. God will always give us the victory.
我们现在要一起跪下来祷告。
Well, now kneel down and pray.
在我们祷告中，我们要特别为这些生病的弟兄姐妹们来祷告。
In our prayers tonight, let's especially remember those who are sick.
我们也求神大大的加添我们的信心，
And we also ask God to grant us even greater faith,
让我们在这世上真正的能做盐做光，
so that in this world we can truly be the salt and light,
而不是像世上其他的人一样，碰到问题就躲起来。
and not be like the average man who will hide and cower in conflict and struggle.
我们一起来祷告。
Let's kneel down and pray.
阿利亚，奉主耶稣基督圣名祷告。
从众主的祷告文，我们在天上的父，愿人都尊你的名为圣，愿你的国降临，愿你的旨意行在地上，如同行在天上。我们日用的饮食，今日赐给我们，免我们的债，如同我们免人的债，不叫我们遇见试探，救我们脱离凶恶，因为国度、权柄、荣耀，全是你的，永远。阿门。
我要奉主耶稣圣名，小弟代表职务会做一个简短的报告。
In the name of Jesus Christ, I'll represent the church board to make some announcements.
感谢赞美神带领我们来2022年的第一个礼拜五晚上的聚会。
Praise and thank God for this first Sabbath of the new year.
虽然我们今天人数不多，因为病情的这个疾病流行病的原因。
And even though our attendance tonight is very low due to the COVID situation,
但是神让我们能够把会堂打开，就一定会继续带领我们继续走在新的一年中，让我们回到会堂来敬拜他。
But God still enables us to be able to open these chapel doors and still hold service.
我们这个教会有几点报告。
The church has a few announcements.
因应这个疫情的这个外面的这个最近上升的非常的快，所以教会有在做几点这个比较预防的措施。
And because of the Omicron variant and the COVID situation being quite serious, the church has made some adjustments.
所以第一个就是我们请大家来聚会的时候都要戴这个 N95或者是等效的口罩。
First and foremost, the church requires that all attendees wear KN95 or N95 masks.
这些口罩能够比较有效的防止这个 COVID 病毒的扩散。
These masks are far more effective than standard cloth or even surgical masks.
然后另外，如果弟兄姐妹有什么不舒适的、有感冒的症状，也请暂时留在家里来参加网上的聚会。
Secondly, if any members or friends are feeling unwell of any degree, we ask that you remain at home and worship remotely.
如果你是某一位这个就是病毒阳性的这个患者的亲密接触者的话，我们就是按照这个政府给的这个指南中，请你们去做2次测试。在测试如果你没有症状，测试的结果又是阴性的话，我们欢迎你来教会聚会。
Thirdly, if you have been exposed to someone who has tested positive, we ask that you follow the county and state guidelines and go get yourself tested. And upon a negative test, you may then return back to physical worship.
如果你没有症状，然后如果你还来不及测试的话，教会也准备了这个可以快速的测试这个试纸来帮助你。
And if you have, and also if you have no symptoms, of course, if you are unable to get a test and would like one, please ask the church, and the church will provide one to you.
然后明天安息的聚会，请我们大家中午的午餐，请和自己的家人坐在一起。
Tomorrow, for the Sabbath lunch and fellowship meal, we ask that family members only eat with their own family members.
教会将会只准备盒饭。
The church will prepare boxed lunches.
然后我们也会把一些桌子搬到室外，请大家能够尽量的分散。
The church will also relocate some of the dining tables outdoors to encourage social distancing.
那当我们尽我们的本分，来尽量的防止这个疾病的这个传播，但是我们最重要的还是在神的怜悯，谁的看顾。
And while we are all doing the best we can to avoid the spread of COVID-19, the most important thing for all of us to do is to continue to trust and rely on our God.
我们也为那些已经生病的这几位弟兄姐妹，然后为他们来祷告，请他们就是让他们尽快的恢复健康。
There are affected and ill members amongst us, so we ask that everyone keep them in your prayers.
好，我们今天报告到此为止，明天早上的聚会10点1刻开始早祷会。
This concludes our announcements. Service will begin promptly tomorrow at 10 a.m. with morning prayer.
10:15 OK.
10:15 a.m.
大家平安。
Peace to you all.